Okay, and I'm going to hand over to Becky, Professor Rebecca Early, to begin our session today.
Thanks, Jules, although you should have the first word, having organised all of this. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special session. This is World Circular Textiles Day 2025. We set up WCTD in 2020 specifically to bring people together every year to celebrate progress in the sector. And it's been quite 5 years. We've done lots of different events in lots of different places and been on field trips to the UN and Indonesia. It's been a really amazing project. And this year we decided to mark our 5-year anniversary by opening up the mic, the floor to everyone else and say, like, what do you want to talk about? What events do you want to host? What conversations do you want to have? And this was absolutely the brainchild of Julia Roebuck, who is a Chelsea alumnus, amongst other accolades, of course. So I was delighted when Julia agreed to sort of create the whole event and really kind of dig down into what it was she felt the community needed to talk about together. And so here we are, and this is going to be a conversation that's for you and lots of people that are in this world, in your world, might join. This might happen again. We might do this every 8th of October. But it's really about celebrating, noting, reflecting, and supporting each other, really. The world of circular textiles is huge, and we've set ourselves a challenge to have these quite global perspectives and global conversations. And quite often, the conversation is dominated by technology and all the big volumes, the really big sort of investment and the big technology breakthroughs and rollouts. And that's quite right, actually, because there's so much work that needs to go on with the reuse, reprocessing, recycling of our very precious resources. But of course, before it gets to that destination of being chopped up and melted down and boiled and re-extruded, there's a whole load of other stuff that happens to used clothing. And this community is absolutely core to prolonging the life of clothing and textiles and to really exploring its value, and in no better way really than in its social value. And so on that note, I'm just really delighted that you're all here today, and I'll hand over to Julia to take us forward into this brilliant conversation. Enjoy yourselves, and see you at the end.
Thank you so much, Becky. Well, yes, I'd love to welcome you all to exploring social value of the third sector of circular textiles organisations. And over recent years, we have seen a massive rise in the number of registered community interest companies, cooperatives and charities, and even unincorporated organisations that are working at a really local level in their communities to innovate around how we reuse and repurpose the textiles that we have and that are wasted, and how we actually write our own ecosystems for textiles at a local level. So I like to refer to it as place-based waste. And so much of the movement is led by really passionate people doing things differently and realizing that some of these things that are kind of new and novel and innovative, seem to very different to a lot of people, that it actually comes quite naturally. And once we start digging into it, we're kind of uncovering so many benefits to the people that live in the same places that we live, and exploring how we are all connected and can be connected through these material flows, and what it brings out in us as individuals, but also the benefits that it brings when we're connected by these resources. I have been attempting to keep track of all of these, what I'm going to refer to as a third sector organisation, which basically just means a not-for-profit organisation driven by a social mission. And there are many of these organisations that work across our cultural sector, but there's something really specific about textiles and extra specific around circular textiles when we're talking about waste, when we're talking about skills, and we're talking about unlocking the value of these materials. There's something very specific about where that sits in our culture and its capacity to create change, to spark something in people and make change happen. And today's conversation is going to commence with an introduction from 6 founders of very different organisations, but across the UK. And we're representing not just different geographical regions, but kind of different lived experiences, different skills and training, and even work life. A lot of the work that we do in this area sits alongside paid employment. And we're really evolving what it looks like to build a circular blueprint um, in a linear economy. So it can be quite difficult to get the money in the right place to make this work happen. But hopefully, by having these kinds of conversations, we can share and learn from each other to work together to really build momentum and nurture and support this sector so that we can thrive and we can really deliver for our communities in the way that we need to. So we're going to hear from the founders shortly, and then we are fortunate as well to be joined by 3 additional experts, academics, people within the field who bring a different insight, maybe not necessarily fashion and textiles specific, but bring a third sector understanding, who bring a consumer kind of citizen-led behavior change understanding, who bring how we can transform everything that we're sort of hearing and seeing on a daily basis in our organizations on the ground into the stories that we need to be able to communicate the impact of what we're doing. So that'll be the second half of the session. We'll be very interested to hear some insight and expertise and knowledge from Helen, Kate, and Lynn. But I'd like to begin by a very quick introduction to everybody that's on this session today. So we're just going to hear names, organisations, and locations. So if we can go to Fran.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you very much. Fran Richardson, I'm here from Cumbria Clothing Collective. Our mission is to reduce clothing waste in Cumbria 1 item at a time.
Thank you, Fran. Lizzie?
Hi, I'm Lizzie Dibble from With Love From. We are a sustainable fashion project based in Oswestry, Shropshire.
Thank you, Lizzie. Claire, Tamara.
Hi, I'm Claire. And I'm Tamara. And we are from Everyone Needs Pockets and Froome. And we are really a network of people, and we put on lots of events around sustainable textiles and fashion.
Thank you. Joss?
Hi, I'm Joss Whipple. I'm the founder of Mend Assembly in Totnes in Devon. And Mend Assembly is a flagship space that is a kind of micro network, including Thread Republic in Huddersfield and Stitch Department in Ryde on the Isle of Wight. We're a micro network of collaborative, slow fashion, community-based studios.
Thank you. And Kate?
Hello, I am Kate, founder of We Wear the Trousers. So we are a grassroots fashion collective based in Norfolk, and we're all about exploring ways to participate in fashion using clothing already in existence.
Thank you. Lynn?
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Wilson. I have a company called Circular Design Synergy, and we specialise in education in circular economy across all sectors, but particularly textiles and fashion.
Thank you, Lynn. Kate? Oh, I've just got you on mute, Kate.
Hello, thank you. My name's Kate Trant. I'm from the University of the Arts London. UAL is the acronym that you'll probably hear me say. And I write about impact in the creative arts at the university.
Thank you. And Helen.
Hi, I'm Helen Orlick. I work for TSL Kirklees. We're the Voluntary Community and Social Enterprise Infrastructure Support Organisation, and we're based in Huddersfield in West Yorkshire.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so without much further ado, I'm going to get started on the founders session. So I'm going to invite all of our 6 founders here to share their experience of social value from their perspective in their organisations. So something that we struggle to make time for at Thread Republics is really capturing the richness of those conversations that we have with our communities. We're trying to get better at it, and we understand how important it is to capture that. But it's really early days for us, and I'm sure it is for a lot of organizations. And one of the reasons that I actually wanted to make space for this is because I think it's a really important thing to be able to talk about what we're not doing, as well as all the things we are doing really well. It's a real opportunity to expand our knowledge base and connect. So we come with honesty and with questions and with probably a lot of gaps, but the aim of the session is to have this conversation so that we can move forward and hopefully connect more to fill some of those gaps and to answer some of those questions that we've been struggling to answer ourselves. So without much further ado, I will set my timer and we're going to start with Fran. If you would please like to share your insight in how social value is interpreted at Cumbria Clothing Collective.
Great, thanks very much. I just want to start off by saying that we probably established with social value principles that we didn't understand. Very new organisation, only incorporated in January this year. So we don't have a huge weight of evidence behind us, but we have factors that motivate us really strongly to make change in this space, and we want to bring as many people with us on our journey as possible. Our values are very much around conscious consumption and think first, buy second, making sure that people have an environmental and climate awareness and well-being that is shared across their communities. One of our main motivators is the waste mountain that charity shops are having to deal with, and we're exploring how that part of the waste chain can be supported better so that we can actually do more local sorting and recycling. We're doing some feasibility work on that, and we've got some really strong partnerships with our local waste authorities, which we think is vital in this conversation. We're coming at this from a number of different strands, and the social value of each element, I think, builds on the whole movement. From an individual point of view, we're encouraging people to think about what they buy and where they buy it from and what it is and whether they need it. We're doing that through presentations and supporting things like repair cafes and clothes swaps. I'm sure most of this will be very familiar to everybody on the call, but what we're seeing is a real interest and a growing interest in all of this, because people build in confidence in their own purchasing power and the impact that their choices have on their own lives and on the lives of other people in the world. It sounds a bit grand, but that's what we're aiming for is global change. I think from our point of view, the social value rests on being part of that kind of movement of change. The fact that by catalysing change through understanding the choices we make and the impact on waste reduction and reuse of materials, we are looking at a shifting economy, new jobs, reinvented skills, understanding that it's not entirely about the economic benefit. although that's an important consideration. I think my personal view is that empowering people to make better informed choices and better informed and invest their money better means that everybody is more connected in this conversation. Currently, probably the only ways we measure our social value are through asking people when they join our mailing list, which is a growing community in itself, where they're at in their journey and their understanding, and we intend to review that with them periodically. We also have those same conversations at clothes swaps that we run ourselves. And I really believe that the very tangible nature of clothing, that we all wear every day, opens this conversation up to people who wouldn't otherwise be talking about waste and wouldn't otherwise be talking about social justice. And I think it's an immensely powerful opportunity to bring new people into that conversation where the social value is could be arguably even deeper. So I'm not quite sure what I can say about where we want to get to on this. It's crucial for us that we continue to learn about how we talk about this and how we have most impact. And I think that our collaboration across the county with our, all of the various funders and partners is helping us to reach new audiences and have all these important conversations in places where they are being invited and where we'd like to catalyse them. So I'm really interested in hearing how other people are going about measuring this and what we can capture, because we are early days. It would be lovely to start at the beginning, wouldn't it? So I think that's all from me. But please, we're absolutely ready to collaborate with people from wherever you are. We'd love to talk to you again. Please, let's keep in touch. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fran. That was pretty much 5 minutes on the nose. Lovely. I think we're having some Wi-Fi problems, but Mary, whilst we've got you,
fantastic.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, no, I've been cut off, I think 3 or 4 times. So if it goes again, just go on to the next person. Hello, I'm Mary Morton from the Edinburgh Street Stitchers. I'm obviously in Edinburgh today. What we do as an organisation, except we're not really an organisation, we're just a group of people. We go out on the streets with camping chairs and banners that say "Stitch it, don't ditch it." We take our mending. We talk to people on the street about the impact, climate and environment of textiles. And we encourage them to learn some basic garment repair skills, because that will help them to keep their clothes going for longer, and that will help them to buy less in the longer term. In terms of the questions of social impact and all of that kind of social value, I'm also a volunteer with the Shrub Co-op, which is a zero waste charity here in Edinburgh, and we run weekly drop-in garment repair skills. I know in my heart that the social value of these sessions is very high, because the people who come along tell us how much they value it. But in terms of actually collecting any data, we don't do that. I don't even really think about it. I think once or twice we have done some kind of feedback surveys of just write it on a post-it note what you have found useful. But in the broader scheme of things, we are absolutely, we're counting numbers of people who attend. So we could give a figure of the number of people who have come along and learned some garment repair skills. More recently, we've started trying to identify the garments that were repaired and weigh them, so that we can start looking at the carbon that has been saved. But I think that a lot of the social value of our group is far more about the inclusiveness of the group, where the Shrub community was very much, LGBTQ friendly space, and we also have quite a lot of individuals with, neurodivergent issues who come along on a reasonably regular basis. So I think the kind of broader social value, we're certainly delivering, but I couldn't prove it, is I suppose what I'm saying. So if one of the other things that's happened is that the Shrub Co-op have recently lost their funding. So for the last 6 months, we've been continuing to function as a group without any funding, and have been remarkably surprised that, yeah, we can do that. But that's largely down to the volunteers making it happen, and we just take it in turns to buy the biscuits. So it's perhaps not sustainable in terms of a business model. I think so. The difference that gathering this information and sharing it might mean to us is that we would potentially be able to attract funding again at some point in the future. Although those of us individuals who are involved in the street stitching and in passing on garment repair skills, our interest is absolutely focused on passing on the skills. We're not really all that interested in doing funding applications and that kind of thing. So that's a problem for us as well. We kind of, we need to partner up, and, obviously if Shrub can get some more money, we can do it under their banner again in the future. But we're also starting to make quite a lot of links with other organisations across Edinburgh in terms of, collaborating on events going forward. So I suppose, our overall aim would be, getting more people able to repair their clothes. And anything that we can do towards that, we're pretty keen to do, so long as it doesn't involve months of filling in funding applications and that kind of thing. So this is clearly a much more amateurish event, way of doing things than Fran has given. But I suppose that's part of the reason for including different organisations, is that there are different ways of doing it, and we're all doing it differently. So I've got no idea how long that took. Hopefully it's not too long.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. I'm so pleased we were able to have you the whole time. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, when you said we're not an organisation, you're not only kind of maybe on paper or officially incorporated, but you represent something that is happening 100 times, 200 times across the country, is that groups of people coming together. But you've acknowledged there the time it does take to actually have to do all the admin and the paperwork that sits behind it when you do become a kind of more official constituted organisation. Just a group of people doing it because you love it, doesn't make it any less valid as an organisation. Okay. I'm trying not to say too many things. Okay, Lizzie, thank you.
I think I'm going to repeat a lot of the feelings from other groups and things. I'm definitely in listening mode here today, as well as sharing what we're doing. I'm keen to hear how other people are doing it, because it is something that's been a real challenge for us. So our project is driven by the community and it's for the community. We've just briefly, as an introduction, we've created a shared wardrobe of occasion wear, so party clothing, footwear and accessories, and we've taken it into our local library so people can borrow outfits in exactly the same way as you borrow books. So they can loan them, it's completely free, they can renew things, and there's lots of other elements to it as well. But just to focus on how we generate social value. The core element of our project is situated within the library, which in itself is an amazing community hub. And there is so much going on in local libraries. So by driving maybe a different audience or an increase in their footfall, it's directing people to other things that are going on within that community space. And potentially even down to, the library staff. It's perhaps diversifying the library offering, so it might generate some increase in value for the library staff personally, their role within the library, the volunteers that we have that work with us, the there's an amazing intergenerational group of volunteers, from students doing their Duke of Edinburgh who want some volunteer hours, through to people who are in their retirement and want to give something back to their community. And because it's available whenever the library's open, they can drop in and commit to as many or as little hours as they can. There's the environmental waste reduction element to it as well. So we're keeping clothing out of landfill, not just the occasion wear that's within the library, but any of the tired and damaged items, we collaborate with our local repair cafe to do some of those smaller repairs. And if they're really tired and damaged, we work with local fashion design students and enthusiasts, and we run workshops to cut them up, make them into something new to keep them in circulation. There's the cost savings for people locally, and the mental health benefits as well. I think somebody else mentioned about confidence building, the fact that it's sustainable fashion, but it's accessible, and it's beautiful pieces of clothing, and then I know somebody else mentioned as well about the sense that they're doing some good. They're not contributing to a system that is having a really negative impact. Sorry, I'm trying to rush through it. But we are a new organisation. We registered as a CIC less than a year ago. And this, as I mentioned, has been a huge challenge for us. How do we capture and record the impact of what we're doing? We quantify things like donations received, items borrowed, footfall within the library. There's data that we can capture through the library. We try to capture feedback, but the best record of social value, in my opinion, is the stories. And I know a few people have mentioned that. So, for example, a prom student locally was trying to make her own dress for her prom, and she just got so stressed out with it. And it was a few days before the prom event, and she was really anxious about it. And she came into the library with her mum and had a brilliant time looking for an outfit. She found something that it just turned the experience round for her. So she went to her prom, had a brilliant time in an outfit that made her feel good. It looked good, and it was completely free. Am I running out of time, Julia? Yeah. So how do we capture all of these stories and experiences, and how do we capture the behaviour changes as well that are happening outside of the library? How do I put that down in an impact statement? We're keen to roll it out to other libraries. We've been contacted by people all over the world who want to set them up in their local libraries. So we're trying to put a snapshot of this impact together to share with funding providers and lead volunteers in other areas. But I think it's really important that we're able to demonstrate and measure the success. I think with profit-driven businesses, they have a very clear metric and way of displaying that success of their project, and most people are familiar with those, measurables. But I think with impact-driven businesses, I've found that there's so many different projects and so many different metrics. How do you compare or demonstrate that success when there's so much variance between the different projects, and it comes down to stories? How do you quantify those?
Thank you so much, Lizzie. Fantastic. I'm actively scribbling many ideas and thoughts down here. Wonderful. We are going to invite Claire and Tamara, please.
Hi. Yeah, so like some of the others, we're actually not an official organisation either at Everyone Needs Pockets. We are a network. We started as a network with no real plan of where that was going. It was a network bringing people together around a shared passion for clothing and textiles and climate and health. And it's stayed that way. So we've been going about 3 years, and I'd say the backbone to our kind of what we do is these monthly in-person meetings where we have around 30 people that come every time. That's sometimes new people as a sort of core. And so how we kind of generate social value, the ideas for that really come from that network and that community. And we're within those meetings, and we now use kind of online platforms as well. We really kind of try and plan together what we think is needed to help shift the sort of local culture around clothing and textiles. And I think a huge part of our social value is that connection and that group that's formed. Now it's sort of become, there's volunteer roles within that network for people, and it's created projects that have turned into their own CICs and things. So it sort of holds this space that creates inspiration and kind of galvanizes people to act when they might not be able to on their own. And I think we've seen huge value in that. And so, yeah, the things that we've ended up doing have been things, we have now a monthly How to Mend Your Clothes session, which is where volunteers from that network help members of the public come and learn to mend their clothes. And that is just, it's beautiful seeing those sessions, the joy on people's faces when they learn to mend something. I think the achievement they feel, let alone keeping some clothing out of waste as well. And we do Sustainable Fashion Week every year with a huge number of events, and we kind of invite the whole town to get involved. So other businesses that already exist and are doing brilliant things, they kind of put on events and things in that week, and it really brings the whole town together, and really spreads the word as well. We go into schools and teach upcycling, and many more things. And I'll let Claire talk about how we evaluate all that.
Just to add on to a couple more things, we've also done street stitching and Stitch It, Don't Ditch It. And I think that's one of the things where we've seen firsthand the impact of what we're doing. We've had people come up to us. There was this lovely lady in her 80s, I think, and she came up and she said she saw us the time before doing it. And she said she's come up to us and said, I'm never buying anything again. I'm in my 80s, I don't need to buy any more clothes. And then she showed us she'd mended her armpits on her dress, and she'd done this beautiful mend. And it's little things like that you have made a difference to somebody, even if it's one person, and I'm sure it's more. But also doing those events, you hear all the, regardless of who they are or whether they go and do something, you just hear them, their conversations as they walk past you whilst doing it, that it's brought to their mind, and then they're then talking about it, which is amazing. But yeah, we are part of a larger project in Frome called Green and Healthy Futures, which has lottery funding, which is where we've had our funding for the last 3 years. So through that, we have had photographers and people videoing what we do. And we also, through that, then we have, because it's lottery funded, we have to have a participation record and share what we've done through each event, which is great for us, because then we have all these figures and of all the people who have attended. And we've tried to in past Sustainable Fashion Weeks record the amount of clothing that we've saved from landfills. We also have social media, which has brought lots of people from our local towns and villages to come to us, and they want to replicate what we do or something similar where they are. And we are also writing a toolkit of what we've done, which will be available for people to download. Yeah, and I'm sure we could say loads more, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Claire and Tamara. That's brilliant. And with the toolkit, is that going to be available from your website?
Yes, I think through our website or Green and Healthy Futures, or both.
Lovely, thank you. Just
Hi, I'm Joss Whipple, and I'm a founder of Mend Assembly. And so interesting. I'm loving hearing from everybody today. Mend Assembly started in 2019, just before the pandemic. And I've been working already in this sort of sustainable fashion sector for a really long time. And got to a point where it felt like there was a need for like really sort of drastic response to the problems that we're all facing around fast fashion, overconsumption, and a lot of fashion professionals as well kind of facing burnout and feeling disillusioned and not finding that there is no place for them in this kind of megalithic fashion system that we've created globally. And so Mend Assembly is a kind of response to that, and it's a kind of coming back to localism, also creating permanent spaces. The permanent spaces have been eroded from our societies, permanent spaces around fashion, textiles, clothing that aren't just transactional spaces, that aren't retail. And so creating permanent spaces that offered access to making, access to localized knowledge transfers, and also places that people can contribute and participate outside of just purchasing behavior. So that was kind of the foundation of Mend Assembly, the idea, the concept. And then so what does that actually look like for us? It kind of fell into three main areas of work, and one of them is a membership, so making it a space that people from all walks of life can access and participate in, whether you're a fashion professional who's there as an active practitioner and is running their micro business from it, or if you're just someone who drops into the weekly social. So there's a membership level, and then there's programming, which is all types of different of activities and workshops and different ways of engaging, and then there's the services, the types of services that we kind of need as a response to the crisis of the kind of fashion industry that we're facing, and that's things like mending, things like localized production, micro production, and so what we're seeing in that is what that the spaces that we're all creating is giving opportunity outside of it's a sort of reclaiming, actually, is what it feels like. There's this kind of real reclamation of skills, of knowledge transfer and of a different, of kind of a more kind of, I don't know, a different kind of contribution to or way of participating with how we get dressed ultimately, that isn't just transactional. And on a personal level, I feel like, you know, what we're facing is that all of those things have been taken away from us, have been kind of eroded for us, especially as women. And, you know, we were kind of basically just confronted constantly by this pressure to consume, and the beneficiaries of that consumptive behavior are quite limited. And so I think these new spaces, these third spaces that we're all creating, are kind of reclaiming the benefits of fashion and textiles for all of us. I think, you know, the Mend Assembly spaces, and there's 3 of them at the moment, which have kind of been a live experiment for the last, we're now sort of coming up on 6 years. There's all kinds of things that are measurable, like other people have said, but, you know, the number of repairs that have been done, the number of members, all the number of B2B, localized B2B projects that have been created. There's all kinds of different ways of measuring it, but it's it's live, it's evolving, and there is just a massive lack of funding for this type of space across the UK, but also globally. And I think that's the biggest missing link for us, is just, you know, having funding to demonstrate the value, the social value in particular, of these spaces and these ideas that we're all creating. There's so many of us everywhere we turn, not just in the UK, but all around the world. There's so many people with an appetite and with the readiness to create these spaces, but we need funding. So yeah.
Thank you, Joss. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Kate for our last founder insight. Thank you, Kate.
Hello. How to follow all of that? Oh my goodness. So I guess, you know, reflecting on, or I should say, yeah, I remind everyone, I'm Kate from We Wear the Trousers. So we are based in Norfolk. So I guess we work kind of across the county of Norfolk. But predominantly our kind of fashion textiles work is in Norwich, I would say. I should probably preface this a little bit and explain that a lot of the work that we do around kind of capturing social value is because so We Wear the Trousers forms kind of one part of a sort of a broader organisation that we run, which is called Waste Smith. So we also have a plastic recycling project, and we have a plastic recycling workshop in Great Yarmouth on the coast. And we have a kind of one of our directors is a folk herbalist, so we have a kind of plant projects, and we've sort of been we've got a project called Make, Grow and Mend, which we're sort of, so we're kind of anything to do with waste and weed is what we do. So We Wear the Trousers was really is my baby, really. And I guess so I've been doing stuff under this banner of We Wear the Trousers since about 2018. But initially it was mainly just me. It was, I guess, an extension of my own practice and me rocking up at Oxfam on Magdalen Street in Norwich and showing people how to mend their clothes and saying, oh, can we have a clothes swap, and roping in my friends to help. But we incorporated Waste Smith about 3.5 years ago. So we're really official now. So I guess, I guess we have some kind of privilege in terms of Waste Smith has been lucky enough to secure funding to deliver certain projects. And obviously, as we all know, if we're working, with funders, there's certain things that we do reports to funders around evaluation. And that's meant that we've kind of upskilled in terms of our evaluation and kind of thought through how we do kind of capture of social value in those settings. But the We Wear the Trousers work, it's only in the last kind of year that we've had any funding to deliver that. So we're kind of catching up with that. So there's a lot of stuff that we plan to do in terms of capturing social value in what we do that we haven't tried yet. So so I'm going to explain kind of what we hope to do. But yeah, in terms of, so a lot of, I guess, what I'm going to share is going to be anecdotal because the whole point, the reason we exist is to generate social value. And I think that's so, I'm so excited to be here and hear all of these insights. And I guess really on a personal level, we exist because I feel like fashion has something good about it that it gives people. And, aside from the sort of fashion industrial complex, there must be something that fashion gives us as humans that is positive, because we all want it. So very selfishly, because I want that, how can we explore that? How can we experiment with that? And I think that the main way that we generate kind of social value, social capital, is in our gathering spaces. So a lot of what we do, so we run Mend with Friends groups, clothes swap events. We've got a hand sewing clothes group that we are relaunching. And we've got, so our first kind of proper bit of funding for We Wear the Trousers is to run a program called the Alternative Fashion School, where we're essentially thinking, okay, well, for the fashion systems that we need in the world, how do we reimagine fashion? How do we talk about fashion differently? How do we communicate fashion differently? How do we make fashion differently? So I guess the way we run all of our sessions is kind of, I guess, in circle. So we often do a kind of deep but brief check-in. We have a nice like talking stick or sometimes a talking pincushion. And I guess what we're trying to do is return to all of those things that we used to do collectively, especially as women. I'm speaking as a woman. We used to do collectively, like our washing and our clothing care and our repair and our sewing, and those things that we now do very kind of, for me, sort of in a sad and boring way on my own in my house. But actually, what if we did that together? And how could we then add value to those processes? So I guess when we're delivering our Men with Friends, our hand sewing, we really design them really intentionally so that we're not using sewing machines, it's all hand mending, hand sewing, so that we can sit in circle and connect with each other. We're very much kind of our ethos is all about skill sharing and valuing equally all of the tacit knowledge and skills that are in the room. So nobody's contribution is any more valuable than anyone else's, and whatever everyone can bring is valuable. And I think that really does create, we've had people kind of come through our stuff and have gone on to kind of deliver their own workshops as artist facilitators. Like, I think it really builds confidence and empowers people to recognize the value in their own skills and knowledge. Really quickly, because I feel like I've talked very just, but on this sort of evaluation, I guess things that we're experimenting with, brilliant. Evaluation cards. So for the Alternative Fashion School, we're going to be implementing these just really basic open-ended cards that we have at every session, saying things like, I enjoyed, they can write whatever they want. Today I discovered, the best bit was. So kind of really open-ended, light touch, not an evaluation form, because I am so allergic to those as a wildly ADHD person. And then also, I guess one aspect of our work, as part of another project, we've been looking into using ripple effect mapping as a tool, which I think has predominantly been used in kind of health research, public health research, but about kind of evaluating projects, and those kind of, I think people have talked about kind of the ripple effect out from the project and kind of capturing the I guess the intended and unintended impact of the project. So with our kind of run of events as part of the Alternative Fashion School, we plan to experiment with the ripple effect mapping tool, which is kind of, I guess, holding community conversations using kind of inquiry methods to kind of map impact. And I guess the output at the end of that is like a report, but also just an understanding of, a map of the ripples, a map of the impacts. But just, I guess, an understanding of those things that we don't know about necessarily. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. That's amazing to hear. Just so many different interpretations of essentially what is joining us as that core passion. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Lynn Wilson. If you would like to share, first of our three other practitioners that we have in here are going to share some insight. But Lynn, if you would like to share first, lovely.
Thank you so much. That was really amazing, and such a privilege to hear firsthand all this incredible work going on throughout the UK. It's also really nice, Julia, to see someone else doing an event. I've been part of WCTD since the beginning and usually put on an event, so it's nice for someone else to take the baton. First of all, I just wanted to explain a little bit about myself and my own experience to put into context some of the themes that I've heard coming through, and then to have some responses to those. So I originally trained as a textile designer at Duncan of Jordanston and Nottingham Trent University, and I had a really bad experience of taking my portfolio around London, opening it up in Topshop, and the Topshop team going, "Oh, just wait, we'll just get the design team to come and have a look at this," and then never heard from Topshop again. And so that kind of put me off industry, sealed the coffin on industry for me. So then I went into what what you're doing now. I was a community textile educator. I think that's the most rounded term for it. And the problem I had was there was very few of us. There was no connectivity, and it was really a patronised profession. So I worked across communities. I worked with women's shelter, women's aid, empowering people, empowering the most socially deprived communities in Scotland. I also worked in international development with refugees, with Indigenous tribes. But it was a really patronised profession, and I was isolated. There weren't that many people, limited internet, no social media. So you couldn't really find out who your community was. And whilst you were really working hard to develop community, you were also very same themes as today: funding, evaluating, pressure to learn all these skills that when you really, as Mary said, when all you really want to do is just share your core skill, which is textile, and empower people through these textile skills and fashion. So for me, I ended up taking a real job in policy. So I ended up, because I was very much had experienced community empowerment, fundraising, etc., I ended up in a role in a non-profit organisation and community development, but very much about development management, funding, fundraising, all of that. And that led me into arm's length government organisations and policy. And so I spent about 10 years in policy. The last time with Zero Waste Scotland on circular economy textiles, where I met the amazing Professor Early, who came to Scotland in 2014 and really accelerated our training programme for the national sector. But the problem with policy is it's top down. And I found it very, very frustrating. It is evidence-led, but it is limited in how it gathers that evidence. And so I really wanted to understand what consumers were experiencing, citizens were experiencing, what was really going on, so that we could deeply inform policy. So I went to university, which was a total shock. It's nothing like art school. And went to Glasgow University to study social science, consumer behaviour, and really take a deep dive. And I spent 4 years there in full-time academia, really understanding what people are experiencing, and had the huge privilege to go into people's houses, into their drawers, into their wardrobes, to help me to understand how consumers use and dispose of textile, and then to use that knowledge to really inform policy, which is proving really, really challenging and has taken me down all sorts of routes and all sorts of platforms and different areas of sharing. So I'm telling you that backstory so that I can then summarise what I've gotten from this conversation, and then to give you some suggestions based on that experience. So the 3 themes that I got were community empowerment. So you're all enabling community empowerment through social value. But there is a challenge with evaluating impact. And so we're all trying to understand, how do you tell this story in an impactful way that is critical to securing funding? And funding, whilst we are an amazing screen here community today of really strong-willed people who would do this anyway and do it without funding, but to create that system, that ecosystem of an organisation, not everybody has the opportunity, the privilege, the time, the resource to do things as a volunteer. So in terms of evaluation and impact, so I've come from the Adam Smith Business School at the University of Glasgow. It's an incredible business school. And what I've learned is there are loads of people in business schools throughout the UK who understand quantitative data, qualitative data, how to collect it, how to create case studies, how to tell an impactful story. But they are always looking for companies, organisations, projects that they can actually use, that they can get a case study from. So my suggestion, my appeal would be, wherever you are in the UK, find your local business school, find your academic partners, see who's looking for projects, who will then work with you to understand the impact and evaluation. And Google scholars, Google your university, business schools. I'm suggesting business schools. There's sociologists, there's social scientists, there's anthropologists. All of these academics from the social sciences are looking to understand social value. They're looking to understand social impact, and they're looking for that empirical data. So that's one suggestion. And then my second suggestion is about funding. So you can tell people a story, you can tell funders a story, but if it doesn't align with the story they're looking for, they'll throw it out. So at the moment, you've got a 1 in 20, 25 chance for every funding application you apply for. So it used to be about 1 in 10, 1 in 12. Now, with the cost of living crisis and everything ramping up in funding, it's all very challenging. So, and I know you'll hate this phrase, I hate this phrase, but we need to play the game. You need to play the funder game, whether that is charity funders like the lottery. And there's lots of challenges with the lottery because not everybody socially agrees with funding from essentially a gambling business. But putting that aside, it's about looking at that criteria. And forgive me if there's some expert funders on this call, and I don't want to I'm just sort of talking generally from experience. And if you are an experienced fundraiser, I would say, if you can, share that knowledge. Share the knowledge of how you got that funding. If you are looking for government funding, look at policy. What is policy trying to do? Look at legislation. One piece of advice I got was when I was doing an interview with a head of waste management from the City Council. He said, actually, Lynn, it's not me you want to talk to. You want to talk to social services, because we are tasked with collecting this clothing and disposing of it, working with our partners. But social services are really the ones who are tasked with distributing clothing to those in need, etc. So I'm not sure whether I agree with that or not, but it was really interesting. Who do we need to talk to? So who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to partner with? Thinking outside the box, because this is a very wonderful, rich, closed community online of people all doing very similar things. So thinking about the things we want to do and the things we don't want to do, but we need. How do we outsource them? How do we find our partners for outsourcing? So I think that was my main reflections. I hope it made sense. I am happy to follow up with anyone to share any more of these points, particularly in the relationship to different funders, whether they're a charity funding body, a government funding body, or a wider social funding body. We can look at that at a later time. But amazing work, deserves to be funded. You have tons of impact to be shared. So yeah, let's get going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you for amazing points and that enthusiasm. And obviously, this is an area with which you are very experienced and understand a lot of the the struggles on the ground for these communities. So that's really appreciated. Thank you. We'll have a chance for people to come back and ask Lynn some questions in a few minutes. We're just going to hear from Kate and Helen as well. So Kate, if you'd like to go for it.
Thanks very much, Julia. Well, so much of interest in all of this. And Lynn, I think your advice was amazing. I'm not quite sure how I'm actually going to follow that, but I'm going to do it slightly differently. I think I also really echo what you just said about it being a closed session. I know it won't be because it will be seen, but I think one of the things I always notice in my role is and I call it a luxury or a privilege, that I hear all of these things, and I've come away thinking, what amazing work is happening. And so part of what I'm going to come on to later is how you tell those stories and why, effectively. So I thought I'd just divide it into two, really. One is before I heard all these presentations or presentations a bit formal, they were very emotive and very compelling. What you were telling us is thinking about some of the principles of impact, of social value. And then the other thing is really when you talked about your actual work, just the way it brought to life all of this stuff. So I work in a university, so University of the Arts London. We've got 23,000 students, of which I'm delighted to know that Julia was one. And we have 6,000 staff, which are about half of which are involved in teaching or research in some way. The reason for saying that is not that there's a reason for the reason for saying that is that we have a huge amount of impact-related work that we have to do. So all universities are obliged to report on X, Y, and Z, on impact, on all sorts of things. And as Lynn has said, very often, and a lot of you have alluded to, very often it's actually about money. And that is the fact of the way that these things work. I was very taken by Mary, which I'll come back to later on, but Mary saying, I know in my heart that we have impact. And if that was the way we could talk to funders, wouldn't that be amazing? However, we are in a world where we need to demonstrate things. So very often when I think about talking about impact here, which in the research world, the impact word is everywhere, but I also use other words, which is what you're doing here. So the social value phrase, thinking about positive change, influence, benefit, sometimes solution. They're all words with different helpful meanings, and sometimes they are good to use outside the word impact because they say something else about the motivations behind why everyone is doing what they're doing. And the other thing that we all know is happening more and more is the use of the word engagement. So and that's really important in terms of thinking about how you might develop ideas about looking at social value, is how you engage with people in the first place, and therefore how you think about the value that you've created. So I can come back to that either later. I will mention that again later, but I'm also equally happy to talk about that more. One of the things that really strikes me is the longevity of the work that everyone's doing in the area of circular design. And because as I'm at UAL, I obviously know Becky's work better than I know this work. And I think that longevity is really important, that even some of these organizations are already, 6-7 years old from what I'm hearing. But I'm meaning even before that, the groundwork that's been put in, the research, the thinking, and each of these projects is part of a very large, long picture. And I think that's quite an important thing, particularly when we come to thinking about storytelling. I think the other thing to say is that impact, I'll stick with the impact word deliberately for a minute. Impact's almost become an industry in its own right at the moment, and we're all involved in it in some way, especially if you think about those other words to do with value, benefit, and so on. And there are people out there, as Lynn has said, who are specializing in this, and they are there. Some of them are consultants, some of them are within universities. A lot is within university world, as Lynn has said. And lots of them are also within other types of, I'll use the word organization as a catch-all because I'm very mindful, as Mary also said, that I think that organization is a very particular word. So, but there are people there doing this stuff and talking about this a lot, and it's fascinating. But it's also, in the end, it can be hugely about funding. And that's that is something that we're all dealing with. So I just wanted to move on a little bit to thinking about some of the things that people have said, because they really bring all of this to life. Because the sort of theories about impact and value are interesting, but it's the bringing them to life that's what's really important. And I think some of the questions, the overall questions, actually, before I do that, some of the overall questions are, what do you want to know when you're asking your community? I'll use that word as well, specifically. What do you want to know from them? Who do you need to win over? Is it funders, or is it something as well as that? Is it to do with using spaces and so on, which is obviously equivalent to funding in a way, but who do you need to win over? So really, who do you want to tell? So what do you need to find out, and who do you need to know? And the big why, which we now know is a lot to do with funding. And then thinking carefully, I don't want to repeat what Lynn said too much actually, but thinking carefully about the quantitative and qualitative data, let's call it, information really. And I have a phrase that I use all the time, and lots of people use it all the time, which is no stories without numbers and no numbers without stories, which I believe comes from a maths world, which is not my world. But it's a very good one, because it means, we can all tell stories. Well, we can't all tell stories, but we can tell the stories that we need to tell, but we need those figures sometimes to go with it. But equally, figures without a story can be not necessarily appropriate to the world that I'm in the Creative Arts University. It's a difficult world to talk about evidence and evaluation in. And relating to that is thinking about benchmarking. So we all have to think about benchmarking, knowing where you've started so that you know what journey you've taken. And equally, that comes back to the storytelling. So moving on to more of the things people said, I was really also very taken with Fran using the word confidence in decision making, because I think a lot of the work that I'm hearing and a lot of the work that we do as a creative arts university is really about changing discourse, which is a sort of grand term for really changing public conversation, changing conversations in museums, galleries, all sorts of different contexts, which are not necessarily the obvious context. And I was thinking about the stitch it, don't ditch it work that two of you talked about, which I've never seen myself, but I was looking out for it now. And I think that real hands-on, it's a bit of a cliche expression, but people really doing actual stuff is really interesting. And everyone is clearly continuing to learn about how we talk about all of this work. I'm not sure how much time I'm taking up, but there's a couple of other things I wanted to raise on the qualitative, which is Kate, my other Kate, saying the reason we exist is to create social value. So these things that people have said, which are so compelling and quite emotive, and that's entirely the point. I think if you bring back the well-being word, that's just hugely important, and that came through loud and clear how important that is. And I suppose I also wanted to just mention what Joss was saying about the participatory aspect of all of this, which lots of you alluded to or mentioned specifically. But that idea which I think she said about participating beyond purchasing, that's just such a great expression and something that I think we all live with a lot. And that pressure, I think, was a word someone used, to consume, to use fashion as a way, or we all know, as we're talking about here, we all know that fashion is a way of presenting ourselves, and it's also an economic driver. So how do we work in that world where those things can still be important without going down the road of overconsumption, waste, and so on? I think that for me, that's the heart of where this all is. And so the skills, the transferring of skills, we also know that there are certain areas where skills are not necessarily in this country, but where skills are actually being lost because they just get left as generations pass. And the other words I wanted to use before I get back to something more about actual evaluation is the words that Claire and Tamara use that were to do with passion, inspiration, a sense of achievement, and galvanizing action. I think those are the things that are really important. So to round up, however, I think the storytelling word is used a lot now. I think it's another word that we all see, but I think it is vital. But I think that's what I do. So I would hugely support the idea of telling stories. I think there's some questions we all have to ask ourselves in that, particularly in the social media age, which is what are they for, and who are they for? And just very straightforward questions like how many stories do you really need? If we create stories and they're not read, there's that whole question about what is a story for. So I wholeheartedly believe in the stories. I wholeheartedly believe in them, but asking some quite harsh questions of yourself about if you have too many stories on your website and nobody reads them, if you have too many stories on your website and nobody reads them, what use are those stories? They're beautiful and wonderful, but circling back to the funding question, that's a very clear question to ask, and then that's what kind of stories, how long are they? Some really practical questions about the stories, but the stories are the way that to underpin and reinforce the passion, the drive that comes across, the number of projects that are out there which are just fabulous and need to be told, and how that can be done as a collaborative effort when all of you are doing such amazing work. Is there a way where you can tell a big story for all of them, which somehow looks back at the longer term history of this work? There's lots of ideas in there, but it's to ask some very practical questions about who are the stories for and what are they for.
Amazing, Kate. Thank you so much. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to pass over to Helen. And then Helen, when you feel like you've said kind of everything you want to say in your response, I am just going to open it out for 10 minutes for everybody if there's any questions that you do want to ask, and we'll have a little bit of a chat before we wrap this session up. So Helen, I'll hand over to you.
Much. So Helen Orlick, I used to run a charity, so I was chief executive at a medium-sized charity in Kirklees, and now, as I mentioned before, I kind of work for the infrastructure organisation, so supporting and helping local voluntary and community sector and social enterprises. So my perspective is very much coming from that practical aspect of what it's like to get started on this social value journey. And I guess my first reflection is that everything I've heard today, the variety of where the 6 founder organisations are and that diversity of where you all are is really, really common. So there are organisations that are really well established on this journey and are using technical tools and coming up with social return on investment and applying value statements, financial value statements to social impact. But likewise, and I think sometimes we can get put off by that and we can see it as really, really complicated. And I think my first point or my first suggestion is that it doesn't need to be. And actually, I love the post-it notes. I love the postcards. I think simple things that you can do that do not add to your workload, that do not create barriers for your participants and the people you're working with. It's really important that you think about those and you capture those. And if at the end of a session you've got 10 post-it notes with comments on, then that's information, that's impact. And then the question for you would be, what do you do with that information? Because what you don't want to be doing is just going, oh, that's great, we've made a real difference, and you know it, but how do you share that story using those 7, 10 post-it notes? So starting simple, and being aware of that, but making sure you do start. So you don't want it to be, you don't want complex systems, you don't want things that aren't sustainable for your organisation or for you to do. So definitely start really simple. Likewise, if you're doing several, I think several of you are involved in several different aspects of what different projects you're working on, whether it's to do with awareness raising or practical skills. Again, you don't have to measure everything all at once. So start with one project, one thing that you actually do, and focus on that. And then over time, over years, and however long it takes, months, you'll start to build a comprehensive story. So it's that classic thing of don't try and eat the elephant, really. Corny as it sounds, it's just one small thing and just start with that. And I think that was probably one of the most insightful pieces of information or kind of advice I got from one of my trustees when I was starting out trying to work out how on earth we capture social impact for the organisation that I was running. I think I love what Lynn said about working with your local university. We know in Huddersfield, we knew with our voluntary community sector that we didn't have great impact stories. We weren't kind of developing them. We were looking at how we could put value statements on them to put a financial impact, but we also didn't have the resource. We didn't have the technical expertise locally. So we've actually just completed a piece of work with Huddersfield University, which are in-depth case studies on 5 local organisations to help assess and create impact stories for them. So that pack of information is actually, we're just in the final stages of developing that. I would also suggest you talk, if you aren't already, I'm sure some of you are, to your local voluntary and community sector infrastructure organisation. We, for example, would run social impact workshops. So it's a starting point. It's a good place to get advice, but also local links. So there's just a couple of suggestions there. I think I have got notes scribbled everywhere because as you were all talking about all the fantastic things you do, which I completely love, I was scribbling furiously. So I'm just going to go, might be a bit random now, kind of some of the things I would say. The main thing I think, another thing rather, is about asking. If you don't know, kind of, if you're not sure what you're going to be collecting or what those wider impacts are, just start ask people, why did they come to the session? What else did they get? What did they learn? And you'll start to develop a framework of things that you might want to measure over and above your environmental impact. Because the one thing that does stand out is that you are all really clear on what your environmental impact is and what you're trying to achieve in terms of saving from landfill, and that aspect of it. Another point would be don't ignore your volunteers in terms of they're a minefield of really valuable information. Why do they volunteer for you? What do they learn from it? What do they get out of it? And that will give you the broader well-being aspects as well. And we know that volunteering is so important to helping people build confidence, to improving their well-being. So you start to get into that ripple effect piece of what else is going on. They're also the easiest people that you probably got to just have that conversation with initially too. So, and I would imagine, and some of you are volunteer led, some of you will be relying heavily on volunteers. Again, all perfectly normal in the sector. But yeah, really don't ignore them as someone to as a group to talk to. I think there are tools. If you do get to the point, as and when you do get to the point, there are tools out there that will help you and will help you put a value on. So if, for example, you know that because of skills that people have developed in your workshops, they may have gotten on, they've built confidence, they may have gone on, for example, to gain employment. If you've helped individuals in that way, so looking at these broader benefits, there are tools out there that will help you put a value on that. So you can actually quantify your social impact. But I don't think that's the key point right now. I think starting on the journey is probably the most important thing. And yeah, I think that the final point I want to make goes back to a point I started on earlier, which is what are you doing with the information and making sure that if you're collecting information, you're kind of doing it once, but can look at it from multiple factors. So yes, it is important. It will help with funding applications, but I doubt any of you got into this because you wanted to write funding applications. You were driven by a real sense of social purpose. So what actually do you want out of it? What is the story that you want to tell for your organisation? And actually, if a funder needs you to ask some questions, could you bolt a few of your own questions on the end of that survey? Add in your thing, make it personal to your organisation. So, and then you can use that data in multiple ways. So you can use it to tell your story. You can use it to apply for funding applications. You can use it to bring people to your organisation to help raise awareness, to get involved in activities. And I think it's just working smart really with the information you have. bearing in mind we are all funding poor, time poor, and you have multiple things that you're trying to achieve. So yeah, I think that's probably it from me, but I do want to say thank you because it's been absolutely brilliant listening to you all. So thanks for inviting me on this webinar today. Thank you.
Wonderful, Helen. Thank you so much. I'm going to put it out to the group. Does anybody have any burning questions or comments or recommendations or suggestions for these last 5 minutes? Just go for it. Yeah, Lynn, go for it.
Hey, thanks. Amazing, Helen. Incredible advice and great to get such rich insight. But I felt like there was almost a contradiction there between you and me. And so I just wanted to clarify when I said you need to play the game and you're saying, well, you know, you need to ask what you want for. I think what I meant was you really need to read what the funders are offering. And people don't often read the funding call. So they know what they want the funding for, but they don't actually read the funding pack. So it's so important that you align what you're looking for funding for with what the funders are offering. And sorry, Helen, that's just as a clarity, so to make sure that it sounded like I'm on the same page. So it was just for that. It is about what you want to do, and never bend your offer to a funder. Otherwise, that's going to lead to disaster. But what I've seen in the past with funding applications is people don't read the application, and then they've spent so much time on something that isn't going to get through. So thank you so much, and agree with Helen. What a rich opportunity. Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? Just about this, this idea of funding, and I suppose what I'm hearing, what we've been sort of traversing as well with Mend Assembly is this kind of this dichotomy between wanting to be a kind of self-sustaining enterprise and being something that's completely volunteer based and is completely reliant on funding and you know benevolent activity, and the kind of balance point between that and where is this space, this third space for something that's in between. And that's why I think the CIC structure, which a lot of us have kind of adopted, is really a great framework for us to kind of operate within, because it kind of has space for both. We found that with Mend Assembly it was really ideal. But quite often with funding applications, you're either looking at something that's really geared towards a business enterprise and a business endeavor, and that's going to be like profit driven and has got this kind of growth mentality, or you're looking at something that's completely the opposite, which is only just which is kind of more of a sort of charity type funding. And there, I know Jules and I have worked on a lot of bids together over the last 5 years to try and access funding, and yeah, it's been really frustrating because it feels like there isn't a recognition of the value of what's being created if it's not either just a kind of profit-driven enterprise or something that's fully a charitable endeavor. I think it'd be really interesting to kind of get together all of us who are kind of working on all these different things and kind of create a shared space where we can really look at how we put together a really sort of a really full picture of everything that's being all the research that's been created and all the information that's been generated, and then how we can then present that back. Because ultimately, for me, the idea is that we're kind of embedding these spaces into our society, like retail spaces, like retail shops are embedded, like, all like libraries are embedded. Like, how do we actually embed these places into our society on a permanent basis, long term, for generations to come? And that, for me, we've got to sort of demonstrate the value of them first in order to then to to get the investment to do that.
Thank you, Joss. Yeah, Kate, we'll go to Kate and then we'll do some wrap-ups.
I just wanted to respond to that really, because it's such an interesting area. And I think the idea of creating new models of ways of working, which you clearly already are, that is such an interesting area. And I wouldn't want to leave the room thinking that the funding way is the only way. But I think it's important to look at the whole idea of evaluation and value and so on. But I think the exciting idea of using the new models that are being already proposed and developing new models so that we're not creating the same models, that's such a part of the endeavour and a very exciting one.
Thank you. Okay, Kate. All right, Kate. Other Kate, go for it, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to just on the funding and I think I might have misinterpreted, but there was a little bit, I think, when people said, "Oh, we're not an organisation," almost an apology in that. And actually, I just think, I think it's Dean Spade writes about the challenges or the sort of the problems that come with non-profitization. And actually, if we're talking about creating social value, I think there's we need to be a rich and diverse ecosystem, right, of people who are playing the game. But also there's such a strength and agility in being kind of at the margins and not being confined with an organizational structure and paperwork and having to do something that because the funder is looking for that. And actually, a lot of the things that I find constraining sometimes, oh, well, we probably can't publicly say that or speak out on that issue because we don't want to, there's a politics, right? And I think I just wanted to sort of celebrate the kind of the non-institutionalized community fashion responses that exist, and actually the stuff that is just really human stuff that we've always done. There's, we might not be able to capture that in an evaluation report, but we know what it is to be human, don't we? And what do you know what I mean? So that's just, I just wanted to celebrate not being an organization.
Okay, 100%. And it's freeing, and the reasons that we get into these things are because, going back to Mary said, we know this in our heart, we see it in our heart. We don't need to read a report for us to know how much joy and just kind of community cohesion and pride we're bringing into people's lives. And so many of the things that we've touched on today around not only from kind of harnessing our community assets like the libraries, carving out and just the sheer dedication it takes to create and have the same conversations again and again to build these permanent spaces, to galvanize and create space for people to come together to share and to learn skills. And especially with the textile skills that we harness that connect us in that emotional durability, it's we're not born consumers. So many of these skills that we bring out in people and communities and networks are just really inherent to our desire to share skills, to learn from each other, to make, to nurture, to bring people together around a shared interest that has nothing to do with the transactional, that is fundamentally about what just makes us feel good and kind of feeds our soul. And this will always drive this work, and it's not going anywhere. And I see it growing and building. And today's just been so brilliant to bring everybody together in this room and to hear from you. There's another 100, 200 organizations that could be in this space. So I just want to acknowledge them as well. Hopefully some of you are watching this as part of the World Circular Textiles Day programme, and please do reach out, keep in touch. We hope that this has been really inspiring for not just the people in this room to take away some kind of practical actions, but everybody that's watching this. Please do reach out and know that you're part of that network and that community, and we are building something that's really exciting. It's hard work, but if it was easy, it wouldn't need doing. Change is hard. It takes time, and embedding it in communities is how we make change, is how we bring people with us. And we bring people with us through through creativity, through fun, and everything that Circular Textiles it gives people and brings to people's lives and nurtures us in that way. We know that to be true. So thank you very much for joining us here today. I'm going to hand over to Becky to do a final wrap up on World Circular Textiles Day 2025.
Wow, I'm a bit emotional, I have to say. I'm blown away by that. Julia, brilliant chairing, brilliant curation. To all the six of you co-founders, founders, brilliant work. I felt incredibly moved and informed and just buzzed by listening to you. And then when we came up with the idea of having expert feedback, not just a sort of sharing, I couldn't have imagined Lynn, Kate, and Helen for the richness and your generosity and your insight and your wisdom and your ideas. That was phenomenal. Really, really superb. So I just want to say a couple of things I got out of the session and then wrap up. But, you know, clothing and textiles have a power. That came from Mary too. Mary's the most quoted person on the call. But this power, you know, we know it, we see it, and we've got to really learn to articulate it and utilize it more. The inclusivity of what you're doing is one of your key strengths in the next era. The way in which we can write and conduct projects and that are really inclusive in really new ways, that will be something we can do really well. I hear you about not wanting to do the paperwork, and I think, you know, lots of great advice around funding and applications, that won't change the fact that loads of people won't want the paperwork. So what we really need are bridge builders between this pool of resource that I do think is growing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about funding in a second, but we actually need these people like the experts on the call today, who can help bring the knowledge, bring these worlds together so that we can do our best work. I love the point about reaching out to find business researchers, and I would also say social scientists. And I've just spent 6 weeks writing a bid which will use AI and new sort of phone-based tools to increase the flow of used clothing. So community groups who will be using a brand new AI-powered app to help them reach more people, to help the circulation, but also consumer to consumer, and also sort of design professions to consumer. So there are all these projects, all this funding now coming, this particular pot through the EU, to really support community level organizations, work with social scientists and data experts and software engineers to find ways to sort of help really with building the community, sustaining the community, and of course those kinds of tools for capturing impact. This is maybe where if AI fills you with a sense of dread, it can be your friend in the next era too. Loved stories and numbers and stories. Yes, let's find some numbers too. And there are really creative ways to do that. So let's see this impact challenge as a creative project. There are beautiful ways to collect the data and then to work with the data. I'll finish there because I've just got so many ideas from this session, and I think us doing a little guidebook after this session as a little write-up would be a beautiful way to sort of share this information more broadly. But huge thank you to everybody. Keep going with your work. You are seen, you are valued, you are creating beautiful, important models and stories for us to all take forward. And yeah, let's meet again and let's carry on the conversation. Thanks, everybody, and happy World Circular Textiles Day.